My best friend was pregnant for the 5th time, and once again, she was sneaking into the hospital to get an abortion. My eyes stung with hot, angry tears. Fiona, this is the 5th time he's forced you to end a pregnancy, and he still won't even show his face. Does he actually love you? She kept her head down, her voice barely a whisper. It's not that he doesn't love me, Elena. He just can't love me right now. I yelled at her for being so stupid. I cursed the faceless bastard who did this to her. Beside me, my fiancé, Vance, gently squeezed my hand. Elena, you've been by her side for hours. Why don't you go downstairs and grab her something to eat? I nodded, feeling exhausted. But when I reached the elevator, I realized I had left my phone back in her hospital room. I turned around and walked back. As I approached the door, I realized it was slightly open. Inside, Ethan was kneeling on the floor in front of Fiona. His eyes were bloodshot. I've done exactly what you wanted. I've played the perfect partner to her for 7 years. Fiona, how much longer do I have to pretend? Why did you have to kill our baby again? Fiona pushed him away, sobbing hysterically. We are already sneaking around behind her back. I can't let her find out about this baby. She knows nothing. I already owe her too much. I froze outside the door, my ears buzzing. Right at that moment, my phone vibrated in my hand with a notification. Your marriage registration with Ethan Vance has been successfully scheduled. I stared at the screen for a long, quiet moment. Then, I tapped cancel. My best friend was pregnant for the 5th time, and once again, she was sneaking into the hospital to get an abortion. My eyes stung with hot, angry tears. Fiona, this is the 5th time he's forced you to end a pregnancy, and he still won't even show his face. Does he actually love you? She kept her head down, her voice barely a whisper. It's not that he doesn't love me, Elena. He just can't love me right now. I yelled at her for being so stupid. I cursed the faceless bastard who did this to her. Beside me, my fiancé, Ethan Vance, gently squeezed my hand. Elena, you've been by her side for hours. Why don't you go downstairs and grab her something to eat? I nodded, feeling exhausted. But when I reached the elevator, I realized I had left my phone back in her hospital room. I turned around and walked back. As I approached the door, I realized it was slightly open. Inside, Ethan was kneeling on the floor in front of Fiona. His eyes were bloodshot. I've done exactly what you wanted. I've played the perfect partner to her for 7 years. Fiona, how much longer do I have to pretend? Why did you have to kill our baby again? Fiona pushed him away, sobbing hysterically. We are already sneaking around behind her back. I can't let her find out about this baby. She knows nothing. I already owe her too much. I froze outside the door, my ears buzzing. Right at that moment, my phone vibrated in my hand with a notification. Your marriage registration with Ethan Vance has been successfully scheduled. I stared at the screen for a long, quiet moment. Then, I tapped cancel. My best friend was pregnant for the 5th time, and once again, she was sneaking into the hospital to get an abortion. My eyes stung with hot, angry tears. Fiona, this is the 5th time he's forced you to end a pregnancy, and he still won't even show his face. Does he actually love you? She kept her head down, her voice barely a whisper. It's not that he doesn't love me, Elena. He just can't love me right now. I yelled at her for being so stupid. I cursed the faceless bastard who did this to her. Beside me, my fiancé, Ethan Vance, gently squeezed my hand. Elena, you've been by her side for hours. Why don't you go downstairs and grab her something to eat? I nodded, feeling exhausted. But when I reached the elevator, I realized I had left my phone back in her hospital room. I turned around and walked back. As I approached the door, I realized it was slightly open. Inside, Ethan was kneeling on the floor in front of Fiona. His eyes were bloodshot. I've done exactly what you wanted. I've played the perfect partner to her for 7 years. Fiona, how much longer do I have to pretend? Why did you have to kill our baby again? Fiona pushed him away, sobbing hysterically. We are already sneaking around behind her back. I can't let her find out about this baby. She knows nothing. I already owe her too much. I froze outside the door, my ears buzzing. Right at that moment, my phone vibrated in my hand with a notification. Your marriage registration with Ethan Vance has been successfully scheduled. I stared at the screen for a long, quiet moment. Then, I tapped cancel. My best friend was pregnant for the 5th time, and once again, she was sneaking into the hospital to get an abortion. My eyes stung with hot, angry tears. Fiona, this is the 5th time he's forced you to end a pregnancy, and he still won't even show his face. Does he actually love you? She kept her head down, her voice barely a whisper. It's not that he doesn't love me, Elena. He just can't love me right now. I yelled at her for being so stupid. I cursed the faceless bastard who did this to her. Beside me, my fiancé, Ethan Vance, gently squeezed my hand. Elena, you've been by her side for hours. Why don't you go downstairs and grab her something to eat? I nodded, feeling exhausted. But when I reached the elevator, I realized I had left my phone back in her hospital room. I turned around and walked back. As I approached the door, I realized it was slightly open. Inside, Ethan was kneeling on the floor in front of Fiona. His eyes were bloodshot. "I've done exactly what you wanted. I've played the perfect partner to her for 7 years. Fiona, how much longer do I have to pretend? Why did you have to kill our baby again?" Fiona pushed him away, sobbing hysterically. "We are already sneaking around behind her back. I can't let her find out about this baby. She knows nothing. I already owe her too much." I froze outside the door, my ears buzzing. Right at that moment, my phone vibrated in my hand with a notification. "Your marriage registration with Ethan Vance has been successfully scheduled." I stared at the screen for a long, quiet moment. Then, I tapped cancel. My best friend was pregnant for the 5th time, and once again, she was sneaking into the hospital to get an abortion. My eyes stung with hot, angry tears. "Fiona, this is the 5th time he's forced you to end a pregnancy, and he still won't even show his face. Does he actually love you?" She kept her head down, her voice barely a whisper. "It's not that he doesn't love me, Elena. He just can't love me right now." I yelled at her for being so stupid. I cursed the faceless bastard who did this to her. Beside me, my fiancé, Ethan Vance, gently squeezed my hand. "Elena, you've been by her side for hours. Why don't you go downstairs and grab her something to eat?" I nodded, feeling exhausted. But when I reached the elevator, I realized I had left my phone back in her hospital room. I turned around and walked back. As I approached the door, I realized it was slightly open. Inside, Ethan was kneeling on the floor in front of Fiona. His eyes were bloodshot. "I've done exactly what you wanted. I've played the perfect partner to her for 7 years. Fiona, how much longer do I have to pretend? Why did you have to kill our baby again?" Fiona pushed him away, sobbing hysterically. "We are already sneaking around behind her back. I can't let her find out about this baby. She knows nothing. I already owe her too much." I froze outside the door, my ears buzzing. Right at that moment, my phone vibrated in my hand with a notification. "Your marriage registration with Ethan Vance has been successfully scheduled." I stared at the screen for a long, quiet moment. Then, I tapped cancel. The corridor of St. Jude's Memorial Hospital smelled of boiled cabbage, ozone, and dried blood, a sterile cocktail that clung to the back of my throat. I stood frozen outside room 402, the plastic handle of a white takeout bag cutting a deep, red crescent into the palm of my right hand. Inside the bag, a container of chicken broth was slowly growing cold. Through the 2-inch gap of the unlatched door, the light was yellow and weak, casting long, distorted shadows across the linoleum. "I've done exactly what you wanted." Ethan's voice was a low, ragged scrape. I had known that voice for 7 years. I had heard it whisper promises in the dark, laugh over Sunday morning coffee, and offer quiet comfort when my father died. Now, it sounded like a stranger pulling a rusted blade through gravel. "I've played the perfect partner to her for 7 years. Fiona, how much longer do I have to pretend? Why did you have to kill our baby again?" On the narrow hospital bed, Fiona looked small. Her pale skin was nearly translucent under the fluorescent tubes, her dark hair splayed across the stiff pillow like ink spilled on snow. She didn't look at him. She looked at the ceiling, her lips dry and cracked. "We are already sneaking around behind her back," she sobbed, a high, thin sound that vibrated through the hollow space of my chest. "I can't let her find out about this baby. She knows nothing. I already owe her too much." My hand went to my pocket. The phone was there, heavy and cold. It vibrated, a single, sharp pulse that felt like an electric shock against my thigh. I pulled it out with stiff fingers. The screen illuminated the dim hallway, casting a pale blue glow over my face. "Your marriage registration with Ethan Vance has been successfully scheduled for October 14th at 10 a.m. 10 days from now." I stared at the name. Ethan Vance. The man who had spent the last 2 hours holding my hand in the waiting room, rubbing my shoulders, and telling me how lucky he was to have a woman as loyal as me. The man who had gently urged me to go downstairs to get some food because you look so tired, Elle, and you shouldn't ruin your own health for her. He hadn't wanted me to eat. He had wanted me gone. My thumb hovered over the screen. It didn't tremble. A strange, glacial calm had settled over my joints, freezing the tears before they could rise to my eyes. I tapped the small, red text at the bottom of the notification. "Are you sure you want to cancel this appointment?" "Yes." The screen flickered, returning to my gray wallpaper. The appointment vanished, as if it had never existed. Inside the room, the rustle of sheets suggested someone was moving. I took 3 steps backward, my soft-soled flats silent on the polished floor, until I reached the shadow of the vending machines near the elevator. I stood there for 5 minutes, watching the door of room 402. When the door finally swung wider, Ethan stepped out. He adjusted the collar of his charcoal coat, the one I had bought him for his birthday last month, and ran a hand through his dark hair. He looked exhausted, his shoulders slightly hunched. The perfect picture of a supportive fiancé who had spent too many hours in a hospital corridor. He took a deep breath, smoothing his expression into one of gentle, weary concern, before turning toward the elevators. I didn't hide. I walked out from behind the vending machines, the plastic bag of soup rustling against my coat. Our eyes met. For a fraction of a second, Ethan's pupils dilated, a tiny flinch passing through his jaw. But it was gone so quickly I would have missed it. Yesterday. Elena. He hurried forward, his hands reaching for my elbows with practiced tenderness. You were gone so long. I was starting to get worried. Did you get the soup? The restaurant downstairs was busy, I said. My voice sounded flat to my own ears, but to him, it must have sounded like sheer exhaustion. They had a long line. You poor thing. He took the bag from my hand, his fingers lingering on my cold skin. Your hands are freezing. Let's get you home. I'll stay with Fiona for another hour to make sure her vitals are stable, and then I'll take a taxi back. You need to rest. No, I said, looking past him to the closed door of room 402. I should give her the soup myself. She's my best friend, Ethan. She's sleeping, he said quickly, his hand tightening slightly on my arm. The nurse just gave her a sedative. She was really hysterical. Earlier, crying about the man who did this to her. It's better if we don't disturb her. The man, I repeated, letting the word hang between us like a suspended wire. She still didn't tell you his name? Ethan sighed, a heavy, theatrical sound of disappointment. No. She's still protecting him. I don't understand how someone can be so foolish, to let a man treat her like this 5 times, it's sick. But we can't force her to have common sense. I looked at him, really looked at him. I looked at the slight curve of his nose. The clean line of his jaw, the tiny silver watch on his wrist that had belonged to my father. He was beautiful, in the way a well-crafted mannequin is. Beautiful. Hollow, clean, and perfectly suited for display. You're right, I said, a small smile touching the corners of my mouth. We can't force people to have common sense. Let's go home together, Ethan. Fiona has the nurses. She doesn't need us here anymore. He looked relieved, his shoulders dropping an inch. Are you sure? I don't want you worrying. I'm sure, I said. I'm not going to worry about her anymore. The apartment we shared was on the 24th floor of the Vista Heights complex, purchased with the inheritance my father had left me 3 years ago. It was decorated in soft neutral tones, cream wool, light oak, and polished brass, the kind of space that looked effortless but cost a small fortune to maintain. While Ethan showered, the sound of rushing water filling the master suite, I sat at the glass desk in my study. I didn't turn on the overhead light. The city lights below threw long, amber stripes across the walls. I opened my laptop and logged into my private secure drive. 7 years ago, when Ethan and I first started dating, his father's logistics firm, Vance Shipping, was on the verge of liquidation. My father, Richard, Vance's old university classmate, had stepped in. He didn't just give them a loan, he structured a joint venture that transferred 40% of Vance Shipping's core assets into a trust for me, while providing the Vance family with a $50 million credit line from our family holding company, Lint Holdings. The terms of that credit line were highly specific. I opened the digitized PDF of the Lint Vance restructuring agreement of 2019. My father had been a cautious man. He had loved me, but he had also known the world was full of men like Ethan, men who grew handsome on other people's money. Clause 7.4, the outstanding principal of $50 million, along with accrued interest at a rate of 4.5% per annum, shall be converted into non-voting equity in Vance Shipping upon the 5-year anniversary of a legal marriage between Elena Lint and Ethan Vance, provided the marriage remains legally intact and free of documented marital fault, including but not limited to infidelity. Clause 7.5, should the engagement be terminated by the Vance family, or should the proposed marriage fail to occur due to material breach of trust, default, or bad faith on the part of Ethan Vance or his representatives, the entire outstanding balance of $50 million plus interest shall become immediately due and payable within 30 calendar days of written notice by Lint Holdings. $50 million. With interest over 6 years, the total was closer to $64 million. If I canceled the wedding without a legally defensible reason, Ethan's father would argue that I had breached the contract, triggering a prolonged court battle that would tie up my father's estate for years. But if I had proof, undeniable, ironclad proof of material breach of trust and infidelity, the debt would become a noose around their necks. And then there was Fiona. Fiona had been my roommate in college. When her mother fell ill, I had paid the hospital bills. When she couldn't find a job after graduation, I had hired her as a collection coordinator at Lint Holdings, giving her a generous salary and an apartment in a building my family owned. She knows nothing. I already owe her too much. I pulled up Fiona's corporate expense reports. As a collection coordinator, she had access to a corporate credit card for client entertainment. Over the past 3 years, her travel expenses had been unusually high. There were weekend trips to boutique hotels in Vermont, dinner reservations for 2 at Michelin-starred restaurants in Manhattan, and purchases at high-end maternity boutiques. I had never checked them closely before. I had trusted her. I opened a separate browser tab and typed in a private number. It belonged to Marcus Vance, no relation to Ethan, though the irony was not lost on me. Marcus was a corporate investigator who had worked for my father for 15 years. I dialed. The line rang 3 times before a gravelly voice answered. Elena? It's late. I need a complete asset trace on Ethan Vance and Fiona Lynn, I said, my voice steady and cold. I need bank records, supplementary credit card statements, and medical logs from St. Jude's Memorial Hospital for the last 4 years. Specifically, the obstetrics and gynecology wing. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear the sound of a match striking, then the low hiss of a cigar being drawn. Are you sure about this, Elena? You're getting married in 10 days. I canceled the registration tonight, I said. I need the files by Friday. Marcus. Can you do it? If you're paying the premium rate, I can have them by Wednesday morning, he replied. Do you want me to look into his father's accounts too? Yes. Everything. If Ethan bought so much as a cup of coffee for her, I want the receipt. Consider it done. Go to sleep, kid. You sound like your father when he was about to fire a board of directors. I'm not going to fire them, Marcus, I said, looking at my reflection in the dark window. I'm going to liquidate them. The next morning, the sun was bright and aggressive, spilling across the white marble of the kitchen island. Ethan was already dressed in his charcoal suit, his silk tie perfectly knotted. He was pouring orange juice into 2 glasses, looking like an advertisement for a modern, successful husband. Morning, beautiful, he said, turning to smile at me as I walked into the kitchen wearing my silk robe. He walked over, pressing a soft kiss to my forehead. You slept late. I didn't want to wake you. I was tired, I said, taking the glass of juice from him. How is Fiona? Did you check on her this morning? I called the nurse's station at 7, he said, taking a sip of his coffee. He didn't look at me, his eyes were on his tablet, scrolling through the financial news. They said she had a good night. She's being discharged this afternoon. I told her I'd send a car to pick her up and take her back to her apartment. That's very sweet of you, I said. But actually, I think I should go pick her up myself. I want to make sure she's comfortable. Ethan's hand froze for a fraction of a second over the screen of his tablet. His shoulder muscles tightened under his suit jacket. Oh, I wouldn't worry about that, Elle, he said, his voice smooth and reassuring. You have that big meeting with the Lint Holdings trustees today, don't you? You can't miss that. Let the driver do it. Fiona's a big girl, she doesn't need you holding her hand through every little thing. It's not a little thing, Ethan, I said, my voice dropping slightly. It's her 5th abortion. She's destroying her body. I want to know who the man is. I want to make him pay for what he's done to her. Ethan's chest rose and fell in a slow, controlled breath. He set his coffee cup down on the marble counter with a tiny clink. Elena, some people just make bad choices, he said, his tone gently patronizing, the way he always spoke when he wanted to redirect my focus. Fiona she's always had a bit of a victim complex. You've done enough for her. You gave her a job, a place to live. If she wants to ruin her life with some married man, that's her business. You shouldn't let her drama ruin our wedding. Weak. He reached out, his fingers brushing my cheek. We should be focusing on us. Speaking of which, the registry office sent an automated email this morning. It said our appointment on the 14th was cancelled. A system glitch? I looked into his eyes, those clear, hazel eyes that I had once thought were the warmest things in the world. Oh, yes, I said, smiling softly. I saw that. I actually called them to cancel it. He froze. His hand dropped from my face. You cancelled it? Why? Because, I said, leaning against the counter and taking a slow sip of my juice, I realized a simple online registration is too small for us, Ethan. We've been together for 7 years. My father loved you like a son. I think we should do it at the charity gala next Thursday. We'll have the mayor there, the board of directors, and all our friends. We can have a notary public sign the papers right on stage, before the main auction. It will be a perfect tribute to my father's memory. The tension in his jaw dissolved instantly. A warm, eager light entered his eyes. The gala? He asked, his voice rising with excitement. You want to sign the papers in front of the entire business community? Of course, I said. It will show everyone that Lint Holdings and Vance Shipping are officially joined. It will solidify your father's position with the creditors. He laughed, a rich, relieved sound, and wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me close. Elle, you're brilliant. Truly. I was worried you were getting cold feet, but this is perfect. My father will be thrilled. I'm sure he will be, I whispered into his shoulder, my eyes wide and dark in the bright kitchen. He'll be absolutely thrilled. At 2 p.m., I met Adrian Vance in the private dining room of the Obsidian, an exclusive club on the top floor of the financial district. Adrian was Ethan's cousin, but they looked nothing alike. Where Ethan was soft, polished, and eager to please, Adrian was sharp, silent, and wore his cynicism like a bespoke suit. He had spent the last 5 years in London, building a hedge fund that had recently begun buying up distressed debt in logistics firms. He was sitting by the window, a glass of mineral water in front of him, looking out over the grey harbor. Elena, he said, standing up to pull out my chair. His voice was a deep baritone, devoid of the false warmth Ethan always used. You look pale. Is the wedding planning getting to you? I need to buy your shares in Vance Shipping, Adrian, I said, sitting down and placing my leather folder on the table. He didn't look surprised. He simply sat back down, his dark eyes studying my face with a quiet, analytical intensity. My shares? He asked. I only own 8%. It's a minority stake, barely enough to get me a seat at the back of the board meetings. Why do you want them? Once you marry Ethan, you'll control 40% through your family trust. Anyway. I'm not marrying Ethan, I said. Adrian didn't blink. He reached for his water, took a slow sip, and set it down. Go on. He's been having an affair with Fiona Lynn for at least 4 years, I said, my voice as cold and precise as a scalpel. She's had 5 abortions. He's been using my family's money to pay for her apartments, her medical bills, and her lifestyle. He's also been diverting intellectual property from the joint venture to a shell company registered in Delaware. I pushed a thin manila envelope across the table. This is the preliminary report from Marcus, I said. The bank records are clear. Ethan's personal accounts are funded almost entirely by transfers from Lint Holdings' marketing budget, which he approved as executive director of our joint venture. He's been embezzling to keep his mistress. Adrian opened the envelope. His eyes scanned the pages quickly, his face remaining entirely expressionless. Only the slight tightening of his fingers on the paper betrayed his thoughts. This is remarkably stupid of him, Adrian said softly. To steal from the woman who holds his family's entire debt. He always was a mediocre strategist. If I call in the $50 million debt now, Vance Shipping will go into immediate receivership, I said. But Ethan's father will try to tie it up in bankruptcy court. He'll claim the contract was predatory, or that I acted in bad faith by terminating the engagement. I don't want a 5-year lawsuit, Adrian. I want to take the company from them before they even know they're under attack. Adrian leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his fingers laced. And how do I fit into this? I want to sell my 40% stake in Vance Shipping to your hedge fund, I said. But not openly. We'll sign a private option agreement. The moment the debt is called, you will exercise the option, combining my 40% with your 8% and the 15% you've been quietly buying from the minor shareholders. You'll have a majority stake of 63%. I can call an extraordinary board meeting, Adrian said, a small, dark smile finally appearing on his face. I can remove Ethan and his father from the executive board before the bankruptcy court can even appoint a trustee. Exactly, I said. And in exchange, I want the shipping terminals in Newark. My father built those. They belong to Lint Holdings. Adrian studied me for a long moment. You've thought this through. I had a good teacher, I said. My father always said, if someone wants to steal your house, don't lock the door. Let them come inside, then lock the gates. And set it on fire. Adrian laughed, a short, genuine sound of amusement. Your father was a terrifying man, Elena. I'm glad to see his daughter inherited his teeth. I'll prepare the option agreement tonight. But what about the wedding? You said you canceled the registration. I rescheduled it, I said, my eyes turning to the gray water outside. We're going to have a grand celebration next Thursday at the Lynch Charity Gala. Ethan thinks he's going to sign the marriage certificate on stage in front of 500 people. Adrian's eyes narrowed. You're going to do it publicly. I want his father there, I said. I want their creditors there. I want every bank manager who has ever given them a loan to see exactly what kind of security they've been trusting. I want to make sure that when Ethan Vance falls, there isn't a single person in this city who will offer him a hand to stand up. On Friday afternoon, I stood outside Fiona's apartment door in the Lint-owned building on 4th Street. I had the key, but I knocked. After a few moments, the door opened. Fiona stood there, wearing a gray cashmere sweater I had given her for her last birthday. She looked pale, her eyes rimmed with red, a silk scarf wrapped around her neck to hide the hollow of her throat. Elena, she whispered, her voice trembling. What are you doing here? I thought you were working. I wanted to see how you were doing, I said, walking past her into the living room. The apartment was beautiful, bright, airy, filled with fresh flowers that Ethan had probably ordered through his secretary. On the coffee table was a small porcelain box. I knew what was inside. It was a pair of diamond earrings Ethan had claimed he lost during our trip to Paris last year. You shouldn't have come, Fiona said, her hands fluttering nervously at her waist. I'm fine. Just a little weak. The doctor said I just need to rest. Fiona, we've been friends for 10 years, I said, turning to look at her. Why? Won't you tell me who he is? She looked down, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. Elena, please. It's complicated. He's in a difficult position. If his family found out, it would ruin him. And what about you? I asked, my voice soft, almost gentle. Is he going to marry you, Fiona? After 5 times? Does he really love you? He does. She cried, her head snapping up, her eyes suddenly bright with a desperate, defensive anger. He loves me more than anything. He has to do something first. He has to secure his future. Once he does that, we can be together. He promised me. He promised you, I repeated. And while you wait, you destroy your body in St. Jude's. You hide in dark rooms while he plays the perfect gentleman in public. Don't you feel any guilt, Fiona? Toward his other commitments? Fiona's face went entirely white. She took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. What do you mean? Nothing, I said, my smile returning, smooth and vacant. I just mean that a man who makes his mistress hide in the shadows is usually a coward. But if you trust him, I suppose that's your choice. I walked over to her, wrapping my arms around her shoulders in a tight, sisterly hug. I could feel her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. I'm getting married next Thursday, Fiona, I whispered into her ear. You're my maid of honor. You have to be there. I've had a special dress made for you. Elena. She sobbed, her hands clutching at my coat. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know, I said, patting her back. I know you are. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a sea of black silk and white linen. The air was heavy with the scent of gardenias and expensive perfume, punctuated by the sharp, metallic clink of crystal glasses. On stage, a string quartet was playing a soft, classical melody, their music floating over the low murmur of 500 wealthy guests. Ethan stood beside his father, Richard Vance, near the entrance. Both of them were in impeccable tuxedos, their chests puffed out, greeting the city's financial elite with the easy confidence of men who believed they had just conquered the world. Elena, Richard said as I approached, his voice boisterous as he reached for my hands. You look spectacular tonight. Truly, a queen. I was wearing a gown of midnight blue silk, the back cut low, my hair pinned up with my mother's sapphire combs. I looked cold, elegant, and entirely in control. Thank you, Richard, I said, letting him kiss my cheek. Is everything ready for the ceremony? Of course, Richard chuckled, lowering his voice. The notary is in the back room. The board members from Vance Shipping are all here. They're very excited to see the official union of our houses, Elena. It's a great day for both our families. Yes, I said, looking over his shoulder. It's going to be a very memorable evening. Ethan stepped closer, his hands sliding around my waist. You look beautiful, Elle. Are you nervous? Not at all, I said, looking into his eyes. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. At 9 p.m., the lights in the ballroom dimmed. The master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage, his voice booming through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Tonight, we are not only celebrating the annual Lint Charity Gala, but we are also witnessing a historic moment for two of our city's oldest families. Please welcome to the stage, the Executive Director of Lint Holdings, Elena Lint, and the Executive Vice President of Vance Shipping, Ethan Vance. The crowd erupted into polite, enthusiastic applause. Ethan offered me his arm, his smile bright and radiant as the stage lights caught his face. We walked up the stairs together, stepping onto the polished mahogany stage. To the side of the stage stood Fiona. She was wearing a pale lavender gown that made her look even more fragile than usual. She looked at Ethan, then at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and a strange, desperate longing. 7 years ago, Ethan began, taking the microphone from the stand, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. I met a woman who changed my life. Elena. Lint has been my partner, my confidant, and my inspiration. Today, in front of all of you, our friends, our families, and our partners, we are going to make our commitment official. He turned to me, his eyes shining with what looked like genuine emotion. Elena. I love you. I promise to be your partner, your protector, and your husband for the rest of my days. The crowd murmured in appreciation. A few older women reached for their handkerchiefs. The notary public, an older man in a dark suit, stepped forward with a leather folder. He placed it on the small glass table in the center of the stage. And now, the host said, the signing of the official marriage registry. Before we sign, I said, taking the second microphone from the stand. My voice was quiet, but it had a clear, carrying quality that made the entire room go silent. Ethan looked at me, a slight, questioning smile on his face. Elle? Is there something you want to say? Yes, I said, turning to face the audience. I want to show you all a short video. It's a tribute to the journey that brought us here tonight. To the 7 years of partnership, trust, and shared secrets. I nodded to the technician at the back of the room. The giant projector screen behind us, which had been displaying the Lint Holdings logo, flickered and went black. Elena? Ethan whispered, his hand reaching for my arm. His voice had a sudden, sharp edge of panic. What are you doing? This wasn't in the program. I stepped back, out of his reach. The screen lit up. It was not a photo slide. It was a high-definition audio waveform, playing over a black background. A voice cut through the silent ballroom, ragged, desperate, and unmistakable. I've done exactly what you wanted. I've played the perfect partner to her for 7 years. The crowd gasps was instantaneous, a collective, sharp intake of breath that sounded like a wind rustling through dry leaves. Fiona, how much longer do I have to pretend? Why did you have to kill our baby? Again? On stage, Ethan went entirely rigid. The color drained from his face so fast he looked almost green under the white spotlights. He stared at the screen, his mouth slightly open, his chest heaving. In the wings, Fiona let out a strangled scream, her hands flying to her mouth as she collapsed against the curtain. The audio continued to play, clear and damning. We are already sneaking around behind her back. I can't let her find out about this baby. She knows nothing. I already owe her too much. The audio cut out, replaced by a series of high-resolution documents. First, the medical admission records from St. Jude's Memorial Hospital. Fiona. Lynn's name, the dates of 5 separate termination procedures over the last 4 years, and the payment records, all settled using a supplementary credit card. Issued to Ethan Vance, paid for by the Lint Holdings joint venture account. Second, the bank statements showing the systematic transfer of $4.2 million from Lint Holdings corporate accounts to a private shell company, Vance Creative LLC, registered in Delaware, with Fiona Lynn as the sole beneficiary. The ballroom was dead silent. No one moved. No one breathed. Richard Vance stood in the front row, his glass of champagne shattered on the carpet at his feet, his face red and distorted with rage. What is this? Ethan stammered, his voice cracking as he turned to me. His hands shaking. Elena, this is a fabrication. This is a deep fake. Someone is trying to ruin us. The audio was recorded in room 402 of St. Jude's Hospital last Tuesday. Ethan, I said, my voice calm, almost conversational. The bank records were certified by Marcus Vance, who is currently sitting at the back of this room with the forensic auditors. I turned to the notary public, who was looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. We won't be signing those papers tonight, I said. I looked at Ethan, then at his father in the front row. Today, Lint Holdings is officially calling in the $50 million debt owed by Vance Shipping under the 2019 restructuring agreement. You have 30 days to pay, Richard. But I don't think you'll need that long. Adrian Vance stepped out of the crowd, wearing a dark, elegant suit, followed by 3 men in gray corporate attire. As of 9:15 p.m. tonight, Adrian said, his voice echoing through the silent hall. My fund, Vance Global Capital, has exercised its option to purchase Elena's 40% stake in Vance Shipping. Combined with my own shares, we now hold a 63% majority. An extraordinary board meeting has been called for tomorrow morning at 9. The resolution to remove Richard and Ethan Vance from the executive board has already been drafted. No. Richard screamed, stepping toward the stage, his hands curled into fists. You can't do this. This is a conspiracy. Elena, your father would never. My father built the Newark terminals, Richard, I said, looking down at him from the edge of the stage. And tomorrow, they return to Lint Holdings. You have nothing left. Ethan fell to his knees. His tuxedo, once so perfect, looked wrinkled and absurd as he clutched at the hem of my midnight blue gown. Elena, please, he sobbed, tears finally spilling over his pale cheeks. I was forced into this. My father made me do it. He told me we needed your family's money to survive. I love you, Elle. I've loved you for 7 years. Fiona she was just a mistake. I didn't want the babies, she was the one. Who? Ethan. Fiona shrieked from the wings, running onto the stage, her face twisted with a wild, hysterical fury. You liar. You told me you hated her. You told me she was a cold, dried-up businesswoman who didn't know how to love. You told me the moment you got the money, we'd be together. She threw herself at him, her manicured nails digging into his face, scratching red welts across his cheeks. Ethan yelled in pain, striking back, pushing her to the polished floor of the stage. The guests watched in horrified fascination as the perfect prince and his tragic mistress clawed at each other on stage, their dirty secrets laid bare under the bright spotlights. I stepped back, watching them with a cold, detached curiosity. They looked so small. For 7 years, they had lived in the shadows of my wealth, growing fat on my generosity while secretly despising me for it. They had thought I was weak because I was kind. They had thought I was blind because I trusted them. Security, I said softly into the microphone. 4 large men in black suits stepped onto the stage, quickly and efficiently, separating the screaming, weeping pair and dragging them toward the side exits. The string quartet, unsure of what else to do, began to play again, a lively, upbeat Vivaldi piece that sounded absurdly cheerful in the wreckage of the ballroom. An hour later, the Plaza Hotel was empty. The guests had fled, eager to share the scandal of the decade with every social circle in the country by morning. The grand ballroom was silent, the tables covered in half-empty glasses and wilted gardenias. I stood on the balcony overlooking Central Park. The autumn air was cool and sharp, carrying the scent of dry leaves and damp earth. Behind me, the glass door slid open. Adrian walked out, holding 2 glasses of scotch. He offered one to me. A clean sweep, he said, leaning against the stone balustrade. The Vance Shipping Board has already confirmed the attendance for tomorrow's meeting. Richard is currently at his lawyer's office, trying to find a way to file for personal bankruptcy before we seize his townhouse. And Ethan? I asked, taking a sip of the warm, amber liquid. Fiona's currently at the police station, Adrian said, a slight shrug of his shoulders. She's filing charges for domestic assault after that little display on stage. And our legal team is filing a formal complaint for corporate embezzlement against Ethan tomorrow morning. He'll likely spend the next 5 to 7 years in a federal penitentiary. I looked out over the dark trees of the park, the city lights reflecting off the small reservoir in the center. I thought I would feel more, I said softly. I thought I would feel sad. Or angry. And what do you feel? Adrian asked, his dark eyes studying my profile. Free, I said. The wind caught my hair, pulling a few dark strands loose from my sapphire combs. For 7 years, I had been Elena Lint, the dutiful daughter, the loyal fiancé, the trusting friend. I had carried the weight of my father's legacy and the expectations of a man who didn't love me. But tonight, the theater was over. The stage was dark, the actors were gone, and for the first time in my life, the script was mine to write.